Okay, we're going to get started here, and folks might trickle in as we go, and we'll let them do so. So I'd like to welcome you this evening to our Kootenay Soil Building Network discussion series. And tonight is a super fun topic because we're actually hearing from a farmer panel on their experiences with soil building. I'm going to share my screen here to give us an overview of tonight's. Sorry, I just need to focus on that. And so the way our evening is going to go is I'm going to provide a very brief overview on the Kootenay Soil Building Network. And then we're going to do a roundtable introduction just to hear from folks in the audience today. It's always nice for the presenters to hear who's joining us and from where. And then we'll get started on our farmer panel. And for the farmer panel, Ange with Crooked Horn Farm is going to tell us about her soil building experiences, followed by Nigel with Cartwheel Farm, and he'll tell us about his soil building experiences. And then Scott Humphreys with Bent Plow Farm. And then we're going to leave it open to Q&A and discussion and talk a little bit about the case studies that they all participated in. And I'm just going to advance the screen. Can someone confirm that I advanced my screen?
Yes,
Thank you.
I believe so.
The other day I was rambling on and I got through about 5 slides and then realized that I was not advancing. So my name is Rachel. I'm a farm advisor with the Kootenay and Boundary Farm Advisors, but I'm also working with Jeff Nimmo with the Ministry of Agriculture on the Kootenay Soil Building Network. So the Kootenay Soil Building Network, it's a collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, Kootenay and Boundary Farm Advisors, and local farms, and fundings with the ministry's regional extension program. And when this funding came available to do extension work, Jeff, Nemo, farms, we all put our heads together and said, well, we could do more with soil. And so, and why is that? Like, we're a bunch of small farms across the Kootenays with incredible diversity in soil types and also an incredibly variability with different access to inputs. And so there's not like a one size fits all for strategies around soil management in the Kootenays. And so it was an opportunity sort of to explore this topic further and also engage a broader audience around it. And what we've been doing with the Kootenay Soil Building Network are discussions just like that. We've been doing, this is our second year of doing a winter Zoom discussion series where we try to engage broader audiences. We do field days, and then we've also been doing one-on-one farm support, which will lead us into the case studies we'll hear more about this evening. And we sort of feel like we're trying to build this soil support group. It's been an interesting kind of ebbs and flows. Like there's interest, there's less interest, but overall, what we're trying to do is like make more of an open forum in the Kootenays for people to discuss their soil building. And as I mentioned, we've been diving deeper into some soil building case studies with 6 farms specifically actually started 2 years ago, where we were working with 3 market gardens and 3 forage producers' soil building practices. And that included documenting how they're building soil organic matter, their nutrient management, but then we're also trying to capture an economic snapshot so that we can have an idea of like how many resources are actually going into soil building and food production in the Kootenay region. And that's these case studies, we just sort of finalized them in the last couple of months here. And I won't be speaking tonight about the 3 forage producers case studies. We're going to do another event similar to this, like a producer panel, to share their soil building case studies, which have focused more around cover cropping. But this evening, we're specifically talking about 3 market gardens, Bent Plow, Cartwheel, and Crooked Horn Farm. And this is what their case study final products looked like. But before I hand it over to them, I think it's this is sort of like my reflective sort of spiel is that it's been really interesting to follow their journey because here we have 3 very different farms that all use the permanent bed system, like a typical market garden bed, 100 feet.
Mm.
feet long, and they're all adding nutrients specifically to that area. Furthermore, they all have very different ecosystems and soil types. From an outsider's view, I feel like people say, well, they all just grow certified organic vegetables. It's like, veggie farmers, but the foundation in which they grow on this family farm is like a very different sort of environment and ecosystem and how they manage this soil. And every one of these farms is trying to grow their soil organic matter and build soil health simultaneous to running a profitable market garden business. And they've all been very successful at doing this, and their journeys have been unique to each individual farm. And that's why I think it's been neat to capture these stories through these case studies. And I'm really glad that these three farmers are willing to share their stories tonight, because when we pick up a document like this, it can feel a little clunky. There's a lot of words and it's kind of hard to convey that journey. So I am very grateful that Nigel, Ange, and Scott are willing to, with their words, explain their journey. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ange. Or I'm sorry, Ange, I forgot I was going to do a roundtable introduction here to hear from folks in the audience tonight, just so that everybody here on the call knows who's joining in. And this is a point too, if you wanted to have any main questions, or if you're just, this is just a chance to introduce yourself. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'm going to open the floor. And Kate, you have your video on, so I'm just going to call out names and you can introduce yourself.
Oh, I do. Hi, my name's Kate. I run a tiny little market garden and CSA called Hoedown Farm. And I don't know, I feel like I face the same troubles that everyone around here does. How do we get the compost? How do we get the organic material, the fertilizers, all the things? Um, and I just love hearing from other farmers of how they're problem solving um, the same things, and that there's really just like not one answer that's going to fit everyone. Um, and yeah, that's all I have to say.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kate. And Susan Lefebvre.
Le Faubourg. Yes, hello. My name is Susan. We live in Harrop Proctor, and we live in the forest. Quite literally, we have it all around us. We're in the tree line, and we have a fairly acidic soil. We have a garden for ourselves. We have a little that is extra, perhaps. I can't say we have a garden business per se. We are now in a landscaping, mulching, forest management business with my husband's new machine, and we just want to find out ways to properly use mulch and compost in ways that can enhance a fairly acidic soil, which is traditionally just a forest soil. We battle with horsetail, and we've done this for seemingly an endless time since we've had our garden, and yet we know through trial and error that there are things that can help with this soil building, and by dint of simply trying, we have come up with some things, but we definitely like some more input from people who do this professionally. That's why I'm.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. And your introduction there just makes me remember of working with Bill Chapman when we started our soil club about 5 years ago, just trying to use forest products to enhance our soils, but not be too tied up with the acidic issues. And it's like this balancing act.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, true.
Brendan, your camera's on, so I'm going to pick on you next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Brendan, and my partner Callie and I run Salix and Sedge Farm in Selma.
Great.
Happy
Thanks,
to be
Brendan.
here and to hear from you guys about your journeys.
Excellent. In a totally different soil where you are as well.
Mhm.
And Thalia.
Hi, my name is Thalia, and I run Kootenay Corner Gardens with my business partner Josh. We have a small market garden. We're near Shore Acres, and Our soil is, I think, a little bit sandy and slightly on the acidic side, very high phosphorus. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to hearing from other farmers and inputs and learning about what other
Excellent.
people are doing.
Thanks so much, Thalia. Yeah, you probably have like a mixed environment there with some historic land use, but also some sandy, well-draining soils and forest all around, of course. And Sabrina. Oh, she's just unmuting.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was just trying to figure out my micro. We are in the East Kootenays. We're on year one of our market garden farm. We're focusing on greenhouse growing right now. And in terms of soils, we don't have a lot of soil here. We're on a lot of gravel, or some places will have clay, but where we are, it's a lot of gravel. So we've been importing a lot of compost and soil. Some topsoil from Alberta, but also some local loam. And so the mix that we have is pretty silty and yeah, fairly rich, high phosphorus. And yeah, I look forward to learning more about soil fertility and yeah, making a game plan for this year.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sabrina. I see that Miriam and Jack put in the comments box, which is totally fine as well. You don't have to camera on and speak. I don't want to put anyone on the spot. And they just said, hello, we're Miriam and Jack, calling in from our small homestead in Proctor. So welcome, Miriam and Jack. And does anybody else want to introduce themselves? No pressure. Ahmed, I see you're on the call today, but yeah. Yeah. Hi, Ahmed.
Hi, folks. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, I can hear Richard.
Yeah, hi, it's Richard here. I'm in the boundary. I have silty loam. I'm beside Boundary Creek. And I feel like I've added a lot of compost, but my organic matter is just 4.3%. So I'm kind of curious about what to do about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Ahmed, do you want to introduce yourself to the gang?
Sure. Ahmed in Grand Forks. Also have low organic matter. My partner and I run settle.
Okay. You're a little blurry there, but I think you said you and your partner run Settle Down Farm and you have, thank you. Anybody else? Or are we ready to roll? I think everyone's introduced themselves. So I will send this over to Ange. And I have some photos to share from her farm. So thank you, everybody, for introducing yourselves. If it ever feels awkward, by all means, you don't have to camera on and everything, but it is nice for our presenters to get a sense of, the community we're building virtually here. And so Ange, please take it away.
Okay. Hi. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me know if I get garbly because I don't know if that's just my computer or whatever. So I'm Angela Weir. People call me Ange. I'm from Crooked Horn Farm. My partner Gordon and I started this farm in 2009. We jumped right into it. We really had no farming experience at all. We had a 10 by 20 community garden in Vancouver that we managed poorly. And I had done a brief organic agriculture, kind of a general course that taught us about cover cropping and mycorrhizal fungi and stuff like that. But it wasn't that in depth. But as Rachel kind of alluded to, we all have very different soil. So, really you just kind of learn by working with your own soil, I find. But yeah, so this farm that we found, it's right on the Slocan River. It had been farmed previously by a market gardener, but I don't think he wasn't really too concerned about adding stuff to the soil. So by the time we got it, it was quite depleted. But I could plunge my arm like up to my elbow in topsoil, which was pretty amazing and pretty unusual, I guess. Now we know we were pretty lucky to have the soil that we do, because a lot of people are farming on gravel and sand around here. And yeah, so this first photo is actually from 1974. The woman who did our wetland design found this photo, and you can see kind of right in the middle of that circle, like the river, or maybe that's Pedro Creek, we're not quite sure, but it's like it's running like right through the farm. So over the years, our land was ditched and drained. There's a berm on the right hand side of it to keep the river out, and it looks quite different now. And Rachel, if you want to go to the next slide. So that's an overhead. I think that one's maybe from a couple years ago. It looks like all of our new greenhouses are there. So that one's a fairly recent one. But you can just see like it's changed dramatically, and the river no longer goes through it, which is nice. And so far hasn't, touch wood. But yeah, that's kind of what it looks like overhead now. So, and yes, and we're right in the Slocan Valley and right on the river and very low. And so we've got a high water table, and the river is just right there. Yeah, it's such a cool shot from the drones. So in the beginning, so it was quite depleted. Some older farmers that were kind of mentoring us suggested we apply boron and copper because Kootenay soils are chronically deficient in those minerals. So we did that. But beyond that, we didn't really know how to interpret our soil tests. They kind of were like, yeah, couldn't really give us an idea of like how much amendments to add other than the copper and boron. And they really advised us against using all plant-based materials, which for Gord and I, when we were starting this farm, we were like, we want to start a veganic farm, because we had both been vegans for quite a long time before that, and we just wanted to use plant-based materials for our farm, but wasn't a whole lot of information out there on that. And along with these like farmers kind of saying like, nah, don't even try that. We used like feather meal in the beginning, but really didn't like dealing with that material. And we were pretty stubborn. So by the second year, we were just like, nah, we're going to figure this out. So we started using, we did some cover cropping. So on the photo on the right, or the one that was just the previous one, we had sort of made these beds, but every other one approximately was, we put in white clover as a pathway and grew on every other bed with the intention of kind of flipping that every other year. That proved a bit challenging. The white clover grows like pretty tall. They say it's a low growing clover, and it is, but it still gets pretty tall. It harbors a lot of slugs, which we have a lot of slugs on our land. So it just practically didn't work all that well, but it was good to get some cover cropping in the beginning. And that next slide is kind of a mix of peas and looks like some clovers, some crimson clover, and there's likely like a grass in there. So we did as best as we could with not much equipment, and yeah. But yeah, cover crops are great. I love them. But they are challenging. Yeah, and then and also we tried to use as much hay mulch or organic mulch as we could. Again, it was a bit challenging because of our slug pressure. They love mulch and just multiply like crazy under there. But we found a few crops that we could still use hay mulch, so we would get alfalfa hay from Creston, the unsprayed stuff. And we found our kale wasn't bothered too much by slugs, so we would mulch our kale and our tomatoes, and that was pretty much it. But yeah, this is a shot of me a couple of years ago. And I'm standing up. This is like crazy tall kale, and that was late July. So we do a bit of a fertilization regime, and then we mulch, and then that's all we give them, and we just let them go for the whole season. And in the beginning, we had a small 2-foot wide rototiller that came with the farm, and a big tractor. And the tractor wasn't really practical for market garden stuff, but it does help us move a lot of big things, and it has other jobs. But this little rototiller, so we would be turning our soil at least once in the season, if not twice, like between crops. But as we know, like rototilling isn't great for the soil. It's not great for worms. And the farm had been really like heavily tilled before we got it. And really we didn't see any worms at all on the farm, except in the garlic patch that we had planted kind of before we knew for sure that we got the farm, but we were pretty sure we were getting it. But, that was the only spot on the farm that had worms, which was pretty amazing. So I think in 2019 we purchased a Grillo, which is similar to a BCS, and that we stopped rototilling, and so then we would just incorporate our amendments with a power harrow, so that we were only disturbing the top couple of inches to mix in our amendments, and then we would broad fork to loosen up the soil. And the big game changer for us was some friends introduced us to The Intelligent Gardener. That's a book by Steve Solomon, and I think Rebecca Reiner, I think. But it was a way to look at your soil tests and really figure out like what your soil needs and how to actually calculate how much to put on, using like a variety of different amendments. So it really gave us a practical way to understand like what our soil was low in, and then actually how much to put on per bed. So that was a game changer. So I don't think we had added boron and copper, other than that first initial remineralizing. And yeah, obviously like the little critters sure love it. That photo of the butterflies, the swallowtails, that's called puddling, and they congregate on top of the soil and eat minerals. So I mean, it must be very rich in minerals. They do this all the time and seem to really love our soil. And we have a lot of really sensitive critters like the frogs, salamanders, things like that, that are just thriving out there. So yeah. Yeah, I love that spider. But it's like, yeah, we went from kind of just our entire field being like tilled and tilled and tilled, to really thriving with all these different little critters. And the biodiversity has really, like, we've really noticed it change over the years. So we started that remineralization process in 2016. Initially we were doing it quite inefficiently. Like we were trying to use a backpack sprayer to spray on things, and now we just we mix everything into a bit of alfalfa meal and apply it that way, which has been a lot faster. But yeah, our soil needed boron, copper, zinc, manganese, and it was quite deficient in magnesium and phosphorus. So those ones we've been adding over time, and it's definitely getting better as we see over the years with our soil tests.
I'll come back to the wetland photos. I just thought I'd pair this with a picture of you amending your soil.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I'll move back to this.
Yeah. And so it's just a goofy farm.
Yeah. It's a bit confusing. I mean, now I'm going to reverse it after, but sorry, Ange, this is you amending your soil.
Yeah.
You were going.
So in the top left, we've got a couple bathtubs that we used. So we get out these organic alfalfa pellets, we add hot water, compost, and a bit of molasses, and we mix those up. And we let it kind of do a short fermentation process on it, which in theory, we're going to test this out better this year. But we noticed that it sort of like just activates the nitrogen a little bit better. So it can be released sooner to the plants when they need it in the spring, especially when it's cold. So for quicker crops, for spring crops, we do this fermented alfalfa mix and apply that. And for longer season crops, we'll just soak the alfalfa in water to make it more easily applied to the beds. Think, yeah, and so what is this stuff? Oh, I haven't even seen these pictures, I don't think.
Yeah, I did. I think
Interesting.
to interrupt, I think that's a great description of your amendments, but this is just showing a little bit of your soil texture, which
Okay.
I think, soil compaction is something you've been working with because you notice, and this is like you're reducing tillage just because you have a finer textured soil.
Right.
This photo just sort of captures that sort of more stickiness to your soil than maybe some
Yeah.
other farms in the Kootenays.
Yes, so we're very silty. We're probably 60, I think it's 60% silt, fairly evenly across the farm. One side of the farm is quite heavy and one is kind of like, and then everything in between up until like the sandy side. So it's been really interesting, but also challenging to figure out what to grow where. Because one side of the farm, like we wouldn't plant until July because it's just generally too wet and too heavy. It's got a lot more clay. Whereas the other side of the farm is very well draining. It's got more sand, but yeah, the silt is definitely a fine texture. And so we have to be really careful too about making sure that the soil is at just the right moisture level before we're going to till it or power harrow it, so it doesn't kind of turn into just cement or powder if it's too dry. So that's been a great learning experience actually through the soil building club, because I hadn't really considered soil texture before, even though that's kind of like one of the most basic things. But yeah, it was good to sort of get an idea of like oh yeah, silt really does need a different management. You have to be careful about the moisture there and not compacting it too much. So yeah, the journey to learning or just figuring out how to fertilize our soil. Alfalfa pellets are easily accessible for us from Saskatchewan, so we can get them delivered here, and we get rock phosphate. It's a BC company, I think. And then we've also started using seed meals a few years ago, and that's because they're easy to put down. It was like a lot less labor, and sometimes we'll mix that with our alfalfa, and they're about double the nitrogen content of alfalfa pellets, but also double the cost. So it all kind of equals itself out, I think. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing there. So alfalfa is about 3% nitrogen, and 2% potassium, and then the rock phosphates that kind of covers our NPK, and then just assessing our soil tests using Steve Solomon's kind of method is how we figure out like what micronutrients to add. And this is our awesome farm crew from the last couple of years, and they I don't love having my picture taken, but if we try to do a rock album cover thing, then I'm into it. So this is how you get photos of me. So yeah, so that's kind of the nutrient management side. Cover crops, we try to put in as many cover crops as we can in the fall. It's a challenge because we have such a short season. So, and we're always trying to get, sometimes usually 2 or maybe 3 crops per bed. So there just doesn't leave a lot of time to get the cover crops in. But we still try to do that as much as possible. So we love peas and oats and buckwheat as a combo. We've done clover and grass mixes. And this year we want to experiment with we've got sun hemp, berseem clover, which is a bit more cold hardy, and I can't remember what else I have in the fridge there, but we are wanting to incorporate more cover crops into our program. And I think they're really important because they're not only creating like biomass above the soil, but the what I've heard it described as is like everything you see above the soil, there's the same amount in roots under the soil. So you're both getting these roots like taking up nutrients from lower down in the soil and bringing those back up. And also they're when those roots break down, they're creating more like air and water passages. Sorry, I'm just going to see. Not sure how to look at the questions, Rachel. Should I answer those now or at the end?
Yeah, no, answer it because I can't actually see them when I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see them. So please, by all means,
Do you want me to read them out? I can, might be the easiest.
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
Jeff,
Yeah.
if you
Sure.
can see them.
Thank you.
I'll start with I think the first one was related to your cover cropping. And so the previous stuff that you've done, did you try and chop and drop on the cover crop, or how were you sort of terminating and incorporating that?
Yeah, in the early days, we had a lot of lawnmower problems. So the idea was to cut and like mow and mulch, or mow and like collect that and maybe mulch other beds.
Mm.
God, I had kind of almost forgotten about this, but we had just so many lawnmower woes back in the day, and until we got our Grillo, we didn't have a flail mower. So now we have a flail mower. Now we like just run over the bed and it just mulches it to nothing, which is so great. But yeah, in the past we were just like, so we just let our cover crops get kind of tall. Yeah, hopefully that answers that.
Yeah,
yeah.
so your flail mowing to terminate.
Yes.
And then you just let it sit on the soil surface and it disintegrates.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, going forward, the soil that was excavated from this most recent wetland project was added to the very low and heavy side of our farm. And so that is going to have to get tarped for a year or two, but then we're intending to flatten that out and start growing some perennial cover crops that we can mow and mulch. And so that might be mowing and leaving it like with a flail mower, or mowing it and gathering it with our new functional lawnmower. And so perhaps using that in our compost or to actually mulch crops.
Great.
Excellent. Thanks, Ange. Jeff, was there another question?
Yeah, there's two more. So from Kate, are you doing the alfalfa and seed meal as a sort of substitute for compost, or are you using compost as well as that material?
So because most compost that people can buy around here is either like chicken manure, which we were trying to avoid, or I've heard it's like the black diamond stuff like can often have plastic or like bits of stuff in it. We've mostly just been making our own compost on the farm, but it doesn't go very far. We use it for our starts. We use it for like long season crops like kale or tomatoes. We always put like a handful under each of those. But so yeah, the alfalfa and seed meal is kind of a substitute for compost, because it's also like a great source of organic matter. So hopefully it's adding to that. But yeah.
Okay. And then last question from Brendan was, how many pounds per acre approximately are you adding with the alfalfa and seed meal? And I'll put the link to the case studies in the chat for folks, but I'll let you tackle that, Ange.
Yeah. So I can't remember what it is per acre, but on 100-foot bed, typically for a heavy feeder, we're looking at about 40 pounds of alfalfa. Sometimes 50 if it's a really heavy feeder. We've been adding a little bit more lately, but I would say like 40 pounds per 100-foot bed is kind of our standard. And if we're going to split that up between alfalfa and seed meal, we'll do 20 pounds of alfalfa and 10 pounds of seed meal, because the seed meal is a little over double the nitrogen content. So it just kind of depends on how much time we have and da 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 da. But it's helped us spread out the labor of of the fermenting the alfalfa, because it takes quite a bit and we can only do so many beds in a day. So if we cut it with seed meal, then we can do like twice as many beds in it, like ferting those in a day. And for light feeders, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I don't mean to confuse I've lost track of which way I'm going on the photos here.
Right.
Keep talking. I'm just
Okay.
I think there's one last finishing photo that I was there talking. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, that's all good. That is all good. So fermenting seed meals, yeah. Where was I going with that? So I think we talked about the cover crops. So one of your questions, or one of the leading the questions, Rachel, was what would we have done differently if we could start over again? I think we were just so keen to start farming. We just got this big piece of land, and it looked like it had no weeds because it had been tilled so much. But if I could go back, I would definitely do really a lot of soil testing and across the whole farm, because the soil is so different. And I probably would have put the whole farm into cover crops for at least a year, maybe two. And that's definitely what I would have done differently, and I would have started smaller, but it's so hard when, I think as farmers, we always dream bigger than our capacity, but that's how we got here anyway.
Well, thank you, Ange. I think what was really interesting working with the case study in your farm was learning about the nitrogen availability from those different plant-based inputs. So this is something that I learned, that sort of the readily available nitrogen was higher from the seed meal versus the alfalfa pellets. Not that it had lower nitrogen, but it was interesting learning about those coefficients to add on about those availabilities. And I would encourage that if folks are interested in that, all that sort of science stuff is in the case study, where they can look at exactly what nitrogen availability you were getting from that 40 pounds an acre of alfalfa pellets. So that was one thing that I learned from working with that case study.
Yeah, the case study was really illuminating for that. I think I had no idea how little was kind of released every year from the alfalfa. So I guess it's just been because we've been doing this this alfalfa regime for at least 10 years. It's just because it's been building, so that there's like the background nitrogen there. So it doesn't all release in one year, but because we've been adding it for so many years, we get the results that we need. And I guess we're also feeding the future. Really. And then our vision for the future is to start using more materials from around the farm, or more local materials we're hoping for. So we're kind of surrounded by deciduous trees and forest, and so that's kind of encroaching on the farm. And so we want to start cutting our sort of removing that and turning it into wood chips, and using wood chips in compost, or for Gord's mushroom substrate, or just as a mulch for paths. And we're hoping to start using the local tofu makers leftover tofu sludge in compost as well. So that's kind of where we're hoping to go. And
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ange. And it's been really interesting watching your farm sort of grow year after year. I feel like every year you grow a little bit bigger, and whether that's intentional or not, I don't know.
I think it's just more greenhouses. It just looks like we're doing more. I don't know.
Incredible. Well, it's impressive business, and a lot of diversity in crops and cropping systems. And also it's been really neat to watch you incorporate the biodiversity portion onto your farm as well, with that high water table, developing the wetlands, and try to build up that biodiversity on the farm, and also manage your your soil health and soil moisture and all of that, those indicators of soil health along the way. So thank you for sharing your journey tonight. Folks, you can read Angela's case study. Jeff put the link in the box there. And we'll probably be doing more field days at Angela's farm in the future, I hope. We did one a couple of years ago, all about the alfalfa pellets and the soil management. So and we'll do some more. So thank you, Ange. And don't go away, because I'm sure we'll have some more photos at the end.
Nice.
And if folks have more questions for Ange, I guess yeah, let's save unmuting for the end. But if you did have questions for Ange, you can just put them in the chat box and we'll get to them after we hear from all the farms. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Nigel Francis with Cartwheel Farm. He is in the Creston Valley farming with his family. And unlike Andrew's farm, like River Valley Bottom with silty soils, we jump into Creston where he's sort of on this sandy bench and doing a market garden business. So Nigel, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, Ange. Great story. I feel like I'm going to be repeating a few things and then maybe pointing out a few differences from our approaches. But yeah, like Rachel said, we're in Creston. There are some very good agricultural soils in Creston, but not on my farm. We are on we're on a pretty steep hill. Our entire farm is on about a 10% grade. So, and it's a south-facing slope. So we're quite warm. There's a project from a few years ago to install a bunch of weather stations around the valley. And one interesting thing to come from that is we found that our first frost here came about 6 weeks later than the other places in the valley. And I think that's really due to that southern slope that we're on. Some advantages, some other disadvantages too, is it's super hot. It's sometimes hard to get moisture to really penetrate our soils. We're going to go with what we started with. I'm going to check my notes here. So I looked back at the first soil test I did on the first year we were on the farm. I did both a physical test and like a nutrient test. And our soil was 17% clay, 40% silt, and 43% sand. So quite sandy. But I think if you look at if you've seen a diagram of like soil textures, and I think that would technically qualify it as a loam. But with all of the rock boulders and everything else mixed into it, it doesn't feel like a super like high quality soil that we started with. But I think it also has some advantages. From the first soil test, we were starting with about 3% organic matter, like quite low. I remember some early days. Sorry, I'm dealing with a bit of a cold, so my voice is a bit failing. So in the early days, we would be out working the soil, and within the day or the next day, the wind would come up, and we would see that soil had dried out, and we'd see clouds of it blowing off the farm, and I'd feel like a terrible, terrible farmer. So part of our goal right from the beginning has been to try to increase the organic matter in our soil, try to increase our ability to hold moisture in the soil, and to practice a minimal tillage so that we're not disrupting too much the texture and the organic matter that we do have there. It would have been nice in the beginning to start with a whole lot of compost, but we have found that, kind of like Andrew was saying, what we had access to was not, for one, super affordable or very high quality. So in the beginning, I kind of divided our farm into two main sections, and we were trying to start a bit small, and we figured we will garden in the southern half of the farm, and the northern half will just be planted to cover crops. Also, we were dealing with a kind of a massive quackgrass infestation, so that was part of the reason for trying to start a bit slow and go with cover crops from the beginning. And then the intention was that we would kind of always keep half of the farm in cover crops, and rotate every other year. But as the farm grew and the business grew, we found we kind of needed the production space we have. We're on a limited land base, so we couldn't just expand out further. So kind of already, fence to fence on the land with what we started with. So now, lately, we have not really been doing any cover cropping, though I'd like to get back to it. What we came to in the end, for the last few years, one strategy for trying to build organic matter and moisture retention was to use peat moss. And that was because it was something that we could get locally. I mean, it wasn't sourced locally, but there was a local landscaping company that would have it in stock, and I could get it in manageable amounts and deliver it to the farm. And we used that as a like a top dressing on our permanent beds, especially before we would be doing any direct seeding of crops. And then the peat would serve as like a weed barrier. And as long as we had the sprinkler set up and on a timer, it also really helped hold that moisture in that top layer when we were trying to germinate seeds. Excuse me. The other reason I think a bit of my ignorance in my experience with cover crops in the beginning, I felt like I put a lot of effort into growing the cover crop. I'd flail it and work it in, and then within a short time, it seemed like nothing had happened. Like it was all gone. I think I probably was seeing more benefit from that looking back now than I kind of appreciated at the time. But it did feel a bit like, oh, if I'm trying to build organic matter this way, it's going to take forever. And it was part of the reason for switching to peat. With the peat, I could see that it would last in the soil, didn't disappear right away. And it, had benefits for many years from one application. Now we've changed that approach again because there's challenges with peat also, and it's perhaps not the most environmentally friendly option. But we still have this need for trying to add organic matter. So now we've moved to making our own compost on the farm. So we have an in-vessel composter. It's basically a big drum. And we add to that wood chips that we get from a local mill. That's some of it being delivered there. It's like kiln dried wood shavings. And we mix that with spent grains from a local microbrewery, leftovers from beer making. That forms a kind of base oil recipe to make our compost. It's a kind of a low nutrient value compost, which is okay for our purposes because we want to be able to put down quite a lot of it, to be able to be trying to change that soil. So that's the strategy at the moment for the sort of physical part of the soil. All along, I also read the book, The Intelligent Gardener, the same one Angela mentioned. And so that was sort of our strategy from the beginning, was to soil test and then look at those tests and then amend our soil according to the recommendations. So one of those, the co-authors of that book, has an online program where you can enter in the results of your soil test, and then it will kind of spit out recommendations based on the amendments that you want to use. So same thing as Angela. We from the beginning, our soils were deficient in a lot of micronutrients: boron, zinc, molybdenum, can't think of the others. And so part of it is it was soil testing. This is my like normal process for the year. I do a soil test around the same time every spring. I send it to the lab. As soon as I get the results back, I plug that into the organic calc calculator. That's what that program is called, organic calc. And then I play with the parameters on it so I can enter my targets for what I want. Target pounds of nitrogen per acre. You can enter in the kind of soil amendment that you're using, whether that be like feather meal or chicken manure or a compost or something with a custom amount. And then it spits out some recommendations. And I take those recommendations and see how close I can get to it based on what I have available to me and what's reasonable, I think, in terms of the cost. So sometimes it spits out some recommendation, kind of think, well, that might be nice, but I'm never going to get that back from what I'm growing in the soil. So that's always a consideration.
What I think neat about this photo, Nigel, is that you definitely have different blocks of the farm that you fertilize differently. Like, your greenhouses, they're sort of heavy feeder zones. And you also keep track around the farm about which areas have received, say, chicken manure pellets. So you don't really need any more phosphorus in the soil. You sort of have these different blocks that you fertilize differently. I mean, I guess based on soil tests, but also, on the fertility demands of the plant. So this is like your greenhouse environment that I know you have it's a higher feeder. So in the case study, folks can see how you sort of you feed your heavy feeding zones differently. It's not like one fertility plan for the whole farm. You're definitely doing your different blocks differently.
Yeah, and the other part of it is that, so I think I'm not exactly sure of the ancient geology that explains it, but we're kind of on the side of an ancient river, is what I understand. So we have very different zones as you go across the farm. In some ways, I feel like we could have every soil type that you want. There's some areas that do have little pockets of clay, and there's some areas that are pure sand, and some areas that are higher in silt. So we kind of also want to find a balance of how many soil tests we want to do. And that number has gone up and up over the years. It's gotten a little bit more. I used to just do, I started off, I did one soil sample from the whole farm. Then I was like, oh, really, the two halves are pretty different, so I'll split those up. And I realized, well, there's actually quite a bit of difference between these two halves. I better split those up. And then it's like, well, there's quite a bit of difference in between those quarters of the farm, so I better split those up now too. So now in the spring, I'm doing, I think last year I did 10 samples. A couple of those are just specific to greenhouses, so I get a result that's just for one structure. Because, like you said, and especially inside the greenhouse, they're treating those as their own zone, and amending further the crops that'll be growing in that spot. Yeah, so soil testing, organic calc, and then it's getting that recipe every year and mixing it up. So we get, like a lot of those micronutrients in a powdered form. We'll take that and I've got like a electric cement mixer and throw it in there with something that can kind of take the dust down, like some compost or some peat, and just turn it into something that can spread more easily. And then we apply that. This last year, we got this new mini compost spreader. It's going to help with spreading the compost that comes out of that Investment composter. Yeah, there's a picture of us spread from that. So we'll hope we'll also be able to do that in the same way where we'll take the kind of recipe for the amendments and then mix it into the compost and spread it with the compost. Um,
If you want to talk about, well, I guess to add about your extensive soil testing program, for folks looking at the case study with Nigel's farm, we couldn't show all your amendment programs, but we do provide a snapshot of 3 different zones on your farm and what amendments you add. It's usually a mix of like chicken manure pellets in some zones or feather meal, and then I can't even remember off the top of my head. And then we do show the different nitrogen availability from those sources. And one thing I failed to mention with Anja's case study, but for all of these, what's neat, these case studies, is we put a dollar figure on it. And I think, overall, a Bent Plow, Cartwheel, and Crooked Horn, you all came in around $9,000 a year, including labor. That's for the inputs to build soil organic matter, for the fertility amendments, and the labor. So I found that quite interesting. I mean, that's a very round, a ballpark number, but it is a significant number nonetheless. And so folks can find out that information if they look at the tables in the case studies. So yeah, sorry, just to sort of tie up that amendment story, Nigel, I thought that was a good cue for people to know where to find more info.
Right. Yeah, and it's a good thing to point out. I think it's really cool what Angela's doing with the organic farming. We're pretty different. We use a lot of animal products, so primarily feather meal, chicken manure. Those are our main nitrogen sources. We've also used alfalfa meal. We found that that works quite well. But yeah, when I do the soil test, we kind of treat nitrogen on its own, and setting those targets for nitrogen and then finding those sources to apply. That's where feather meal is nice because it's basically only nitrogen. So you can really just focus on that one. So that's part of our strategy. Checking my notes, what I wanted to do different from the start. Kind of similar to Ange, like ideally, sure, it would have been nice to grow cover crops for a few years before we really started. That wasn't really an option because we got to pay the bills. It would have also been nice to kind of being able to do more of a drastic change at the beginning, like whether it was compost or peat or something, but just have a lot more and just put it all on at the beginning and work it in. I think that would be more efficient. We kind of like speed the process along. But I also didn't know what I was doing when I started, and it's probably better that I didn't do anything too drastic. You got to learn along the way. Yeah, and it was cool to become part of the case study just to see what the other people are doing, and how it's in some ways very similar and in some ways quite different approaches, but different approaches that really end up pretty close to the same place in terms of results, and what we're putting down in cost is really, really cool. And just to have kind of outside eyes on what I'm doing, because most of the time I feel like I'm just on my own and alone in my office doing my calculations and then spreading my fertilizers. So hoping that I'm doing it right. So it was good to have outside eyes and definitely learned a few things, and we can talk about beds and paths and all kinds of things that we learned about how we calculate what we're putting down. And then the vision, like we're looking at where we are with the farm now. It's soil health has been a bit of a focus. Honestly, in the last few years, it's kind of taken the backseat to a lot of other infrastructure projects that we've been up to. But I would like to kind of get back to a real focus on soil. And as we're looking at the future of the farm, we're also considering, maybe it would be better to scale back a bit so that we're not, we can incorporate more cover cropping. Maybe limiting ourselves to a smaller area. So that's, part of the vision for the future. Maybe scaling it back a little bit. We have been trying through our projects and our management to we've been trying to get to being like a what you might call like low impact farm, I might say. So we now generate all of our own electricity and we do all of our deliveries by electric van. It's part of also trying to uh, create our own inputs through making our own compost through local waste products. Um, and this greenhouse that's in the photo here. This is uh, if you see this sort of weird thing up at the top, think what's that casting a shadow? Those are insulated blankets that roll down over the whole structure and add insulation for the night. So every night they roll down, every morning they roll up. And with that system, we were able to heat the greenhouse with a little electric heater that's then powered from our solar array. So that's kind of the grander vision, and maybe getting back to doing more cover cropping is also a part of that, is that creating that fertility ourselves, keeping it local. Apologize for the voice and the
You've done great. Thank you, Nigel.
cold thoughts, but I think I'll wrap it up there so we can hear from Scott.
Yeah. Well, and Jeff, let me know if there's any questions. I think that's a good way to go. Like immediate questions, put them in the chat box, and if not, we'll just open it up at the end for people to ask questions. But I think it's like really fascinating watching your farm journey. Just for consumers out there, they think, oh, I'm buying local. That's an environmental goal, is just buying local. And it's interesting to see farmers themselves try to really improve their own environmental sustainability. And I see that with all certified organic and even just like regenerative market gardens across our region, is that you're continually trying to strive to make your environmental footprint better or more sustainable, no matter what that is. And I think that's because you as farmers, you realize after a few years, like I have to bring all these off-farm inputs to make my business happen. And so that it kind of naturally comes to want to try to build your sustainability goals more on farm. And I mean, Ange, with building the wetlands and yourself generating more power on farm, and also like just even the blanket idea on the greenhouse, like conserving and utilizing the energy that's there for crop production. It's really fascinating to see your journey and all farms. Like, what year is this for you, Nigel? You said year 10?
This year is 12.
This year's year 12, and you're still just like building the farm to what its potential can be, which is really fascinating to watch that sort of grow and your sustainability goals sort of blossom. And that's neat to hear that, after all these infrastructure projects, maybe you'll go back to the soil vision and try that out. But thank you so much for participating in the case study and sharing your farm journey. And Nigel has hosted farm tours at his farm recently, specifically looking at, solar and topics such as like on-farm energy. So he's definitely a go-to regarding solar projects. And Nigel, do you want to get out there and start helping build greenhouses with blankets for people?
Hard no.
Hard no. It's not easy.
2 was enough for me.
But people know where to go if they want to talk about a distributor. So thank you very much.
Happy to talk about it, but I'm going to leave the building to the professionals.
Yeah. Sorry, I set you up there I knew what the answer would be, but thank you. So yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And like I said, at the end, we can unmute and just have a discussion at the end. If you have questions in the meantime, you can put them in the chat box. And if not, we'll turn it over to Scott with Bent Plow Farm. So we went from the river valleys of Ange's farm up to the Creston Valley south facing 10% grade hot sandy slopes of Creston. And now we're back into Blewett, which is just outside of Nelson, the Bent Plow Farm, which, the easiest way to put this is like a small forest environment, again, on like a kind of a plateau. You can see forest here, and Scott's going to tell you more. So Scott, welcome. Thank you for telling us about your farm today and your soil building journey.
Yeah,
because
thanks.
it's
That
exciting.
yeah, thanks for having me on. It was so great to actually hear a little bit more in depth from Ange and Nigel. But the first thing I was going to say is, Rachel, it's like 10 after 7. How are we doing for time in terms of the context of this? Because I was just looking at our outline in terms of that, and we've kind of like overshot. So
Yeah, we kind of overshot.
how tight do you need me to keep this? Because I can do like make it 5 minutes. I can make it 10 minutes. I can make it half an hour. I could like roll it for
I'm not too. It's on
okay.
Zoom. People are in their in their gym
Okay.
jams. If they're watching a recording, they can fast forward things. So
Yeah, there'll
I
be a
would
lot of that.
say
Okay.
tell your story, and if you go maybe just after 10 minutes, just be cognizant of that. But I think
Yeah.
everyone's having a good time.
Okay. Sounds good. Nigel, you sounded great. The vocal fry from your cold was quite nice to listen to. So I'm also kind of in the same boat of that. And I we also have like a sleeping or a 1 and a bit year old trying to go to bed with a cold who's not too far away. So if they're screaming in the background, that's like I'm being an okay dad. It's just like so just bear that all in mind. But I'll try and crack on with this, even though I'm have cold thoughts going on here too. Yeah, Bent Plow Farm. Emma and I have been at it as Bent Plow Farm since 2015. We were farming in Eastern Ontario first for a couple of years, and then moved here. Going from a lacustrine based like essentially an old lake bottom, like really heavy clay, to Blewett, which is an old glacier fluvial outflow. So our farm is 2.5 acres, but within the 2.5 acres, we have sandy bits, we have loamy bits, we have like clay seams, and that could all be in one 50-foot bed. So there's a lot of challenges that we've had to face. I think thinking about what the other two were saying, I kind of made a note of being like, oh, low nutrient organic matter is kind of what I've been looking for and continue to look for. Um, like quite a bit like Nigel's soil. We do, like I said, we're sandy and loam, but we actually have really high percentage of coarse fragment. So we have really rapidly draining soil in a lot of places, and in some places less so. I just think about when a couple of years ago we did that soil test, and and when we were doing some soil tests on board, and we had the ministry there doing like demonstrating soil tests. We were doing we did a percolation test, and they had done it. And I might be misremembering this, but this is at least how I tell the story. Is they were doing it on a farm, and it's a percolation test where you essentially like fill a tube with a set amount of water, and you time it going through. And they did one farm in Grand Forks, and I think it took 9 minutes to percolate through. They did one in like East Kootenays in like a clay seam, and it took 23 minutes for the water to percolate all through. And then they did it at our place, and it was 45 seconds. So we like it's kind of it frames it as a bigger problem. That said, as it's like I do actually quite like our soil, even though it's funny. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of where we started, and we kind of started. We got on the farm in 2017 when we first moved out, and took a year, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna like plow it and do a cover crop. But we didn't really have like irrigation set up, and me coming from Eastern Ontario where it rains like an inch every 2 weeks, I was a little misinformed. So I definitely did a cover crop, but nothing really happened. And we did do a bit of plowing, and I kind of noted that we hit a few rocks here and there, but I didn't really know what the level of that is. And then kind of with that we ended up doing we did try and do some other things because like these guys are saying compost is kind of hard and expensive to get out here, so we did go the Steve Solomon method, and we did do um the kind of like remineralization for a while, but as we kind of kept going and started like turning these beds and starting to put them into production, we realized that the rocks
were um, presenting to be a big problem. And so what we ended up doing is what I referred to as a full tilt. So essentially we just like forgot about like we just said soil tests, who cares? We're inverting the soil. We're completely messing it up. Like it doesn't make sense even to take a baseline in some ways. And the thing that we knew more than anything else was our soil was really rapidly draining. And we were acidic. So we would go through block by block, and this is during production season, and it's actually giving me a bit of anxiety looking at this again. To kind of go through block by block. So a block for us is 16 beds, and we would go through, and I would hand pull rocks, but sometimes in certain areas there was big rocks that we had to get some machines in. And then after that, we would usually do a pH application and a compost, and we'd start evaluating that and working on getting our pH up and up and up. So our pH was anywhere from like anywhere from 5.5 to 6. And we've started kind of like pushing that 6.5 little bit higher. So that's kind of been our main thing. So like the full till was just full soil inversion, um, lots of rock removal, and then pH compost. And now when we started to do this soil testing, uh, like this case study, it actually kind of came at a more or less a perfect point. Aside from this last block, which we've been leaving for a long time, which is the ones that are what is the one in the same in the photo. It's the same photo or same block. I knew it was bad. I didn't think it was quite this bad. This is like a little extreme for our beds. So it's like the whole field wasn't like this. This is like very, very specific. But other than that, we had kind of done this treatment to the other 2.5 acres. And so I was kind of ready to look at it kind of more seriously. And so with the case study, we had been applying like a 444 and a compost. Part of it was also like a method of wanting to homogenize the soil as well. As I said earlier, it's pretty it was sandy and clay and silty in different spots, and the organic matter was kind of all over the place. And so we're trying to treat that and trying to like homogenize the soil as much as possible, as much as we could. And so yeah, so that's kind of where we were at. And now I have to grab my train of thought and bring it back to the station. So, okay. Um,
Yeah. How about like here's a photo of your compost, which is kind of
yeah, so
been
here's
your strategy for the last, I don't know,
yes.
8 years.
Yeah, so that had been kind of our strategy, and we were looking at starting to reevaluate this and relook at how we could be doing it better and how we could actually be kind of like looking at our soil tests more as opposed to just ignoring the whole thing. And so with the case study is that was kind of the point, that was kind of the snapshot in time. And so like since that and in like reviewing that, we've kind of like moved on to that into like a new standard operating procedure that we're still continuing to adjust. But the big takeaway that came out of this whole case study for me more than anything else was discussing nitrogen availability of different amendments. So with an alfalfa meal, typically it's it's a 3% nitrogen, but of that nitrogen, only about 1% of or 30% of it is plant available at the time. So it's really that's not how I was doing the math calculations. So I was hypothetically under applying by like 2/3. Like I should have been applying 3 times as much for the amount of nitrogen that I thought I was getting. And that varies from nitrogen source to nitrogen source, but that was really eye-opening. And so our initial snapshot in this the initial It's the child crying in the background that's like tweaking me out a little bit.
No, it's fine.
Is
What's kind of neat is that, um, like as opposed to like Nigel's farm, where Nigel's adding peat for organic matter and then uh, fertilizer, you're adding it as like a combo with this, you know, compost that you're like this is compost from the Fraser Valley. I know you've gotten it from different sources, but you were sort of adding it as a bundle.
yeah.
And then you were talking about like the nitrogen availability from different inputs. And like through this case study, we were kind of looking at the nitrogen availability from this kind of livestock manure versus like other inputs.
Yes, yeah. And so the initial standard operating procedures that snapshotted in this case study had the like I was evaluating that I thought that the 444 that was in there was doing more of the heavy lifting than the compost was. The compost is like a 1%. And I was applying the 444. And I was always hesitant to pull back on the compost just insofar as partially for the organic matter, but partially because I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I just didn't feel comfortable with it. But as it turned out was that the compost was doing most of the heavy lifting and the 444 was doing not very much actually. We already have quite high phosphorus in the soil, so I didn't really need that. And our potassium levels are okay, so I didn't really need that. And then I wasn't even adding that much nitrogen. So that was really good for me to realize being like, oh, what I'm doing is actually just kind of a waste of time. So with that, I was kind of thinking about how we could be dialing back our compost because now we've been applying compost at such a heavy rate that our organic matter is now like 10-ish%. And when we kind of started, it was like 4 or 5. It kind of depends on where it is, of course, because the soil's so variable. And so that was kind of the question with this, like going forward. So after this whole like nutrient management, this whole nutrient management case study is now it's like been a feather meal and compost, uh, a, a feather meal and compost kind of combo now is where we're going. But in I guess yeah, I guess at this point in time too is like this is still sort of an ever evolving thing for us. And I'm really interested in kind of like reevaluating what we did. Because also we did do the onion trial this past season. And when we were relooking, when Jeff was relooking at some of the numbers, the Black Diamond was still putting quite a lot of, not the Black Diamond, the Ridge Valley Tri-Blend compost was still putting a lot of nitrogen in and was still doing most of the heavy lifting of versus the feather meal. And so the ammonium levels were quite a bit higher. And now also with that, um, that's kind of like a bit of a thing that I need to look at a little bit more. But kind of tying into this a little bit is that with our rapidly draining soil, um, the we did this onion trial and we measured out what all the nitrogen sources were, and we did that evaluation, and then we actually did like a post-harvest nitrate test, and what kind of came out of that was that the nitrate from our my standard operating procedure um, ended up having still like elevated, but not like as elevated as nitrogen sources as nitrate as it should have, given the amount of nitrogen that we were applying. So that's kind of like the thing that I want to like try and figure out now. Um, so like our nutrient management technique is kind of like evolving and like I feel like I've been doing this for a little bit of time and I still feel like I'm making mistakes and muddling my way through uh to to do that. Um We I'm just looking kind of back to this outline for presentation on challenges and opportunities for cover cropping. We have a 2.5 acre farm. I mean, I wish we had more space so we could do it. I'd love to have a 5 acre farm and like have half of it in cover crop and then like be able to like cycle that in some way or other. I do find that inevitably weed management even within the cover crop can be challenging too. So that's sometimes a bit of like a thing that scares me a tiny bit about cover crop. The way that we think about cover crop on our farm specifically is there's kind of three use cases. One is we use cover crop for a block of beds that we know that we're going to be doing our fall brassicas into. So that's just a designated thing. It's like a 16 by 100 foot bed, permanent bed setup that that we will usually do like a peas and oats cover crop in there. And so we just seed that out in the spring. If we have any kind of breaks during the season, we will try and use like a short cover crop, a short cycle cover crop that we can just like throw in if we know we're going to do a fall planting or something. That's usually like a buckwheat for us. We have done some experimentation with sun hemp. I am really curious to see how Angie's results are going to come out with the sun hemp because it didn't like our soil. It didn't like the cold overnights. And so it grew a bit and then it kind of like didn't really get much beyond like maybe a foot high and that then it kind of just petered out. And then then the last thing that that we'll do our cover crop for is usually anything that kind of comes out in the fall. We'll throw in cover. Like even if it's coming out in September, October, like especially now. Um, I had kind of uh, we had harvested our potatoes, and I was like, oh, it's like getting pretty late. Um, should I even throw a cover crop in? But and then I was like, yeah, I guess I might as well. And then we had a fairly mild November, and that cover crop got to be, 6 inches high before it terminated. And it's like, that's great. That's like just a little bit more organic matter. That's a little bit more root matter in the soil. That's just like a little bit more biological activity that's going on. And it's just nice to not have soil super, super bare in that context. Um, if I'm thinking about what I would have done differently from the start, I, I don't know because, like these guys said, is we like you take on too much, and then you continue to on too much, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I actually did a whole lot of stuff. But the dauntingness of like thinking about if I had like whispered in the ear of myself, like looking at the farm for the first time, be like, hey, do you know how many rocks there are on these fields? Do you know how much time you're going to spend doing that? I might have like looked for a different place to farm, to be honest with you. But it's like that kind of incrementalism, and that's sort of what farming is. It's just like you do this like thing, and then you do this other thing, and you do this other thing, and then you like look back and you're like, well, I've actually like kind of gone a long ways. We did like to be fair, because we had farmed in Eastern Ontario first, we kind of did have like a second kick at the cat. Um, for this farm coming to it. And the big thing for us was like, yeah, like get the big infrastructure pieces in place as big as you can before you start getting too much into like getting into like doing no till and all that kind of stuff because I've got to like go through with machines and do some digging. That said, this summer, I ended up spending a couple hundred hours during the season putting in new fancy timed irrigation. So yeah, that's kind of a thing. The reason why I think that the irrigation piece is actually kind of interesting in the context of this is just like cycling back to the rapidly draining soil that we have here, is now I can really dive deep into how we are watering each of our blocks, and I can control that to the minute. So when I did some early tests, I've got like a soil with this integrated irrigation system I have. I've got like soil sensors in the ground that will like evaluate what like how fast our soil is drying out. And already I've been able to like change and have like reevaluate how we're doing drip in certain hoop houses because we instead of now doing like 1 hour a day or whatever, it now it might be like 15 minutes 4 times a day. And like that keeps the soil profile a lot more consistently wet as opposed to this up and down because of how rapidly draining our soil is. So I just turned that whole system on, kind of locked in by like August of last year. So I'm looking forward to kind of like um, dialing that in a fair bit. And
Yeah, and we should make a plug that we are doing a field day specifically on your irrigation system at the end of April. So if
yeah,
anybody wants to come out and like geek out, like Scott's got this great app. He can see his soil moisture real time, all on his phone. Like you're really fine tuning your irrigation. This will be your first full season using that, but it's sort of interesting, like your Nigel's journey, just like you're working on soil crop production fertility, but like all these huge crazy infrastructure projects to once again make the farm more efficient, more sustainable, all of those great goals. But it has been a lot of multitasking through the last,
yeah,
to say the least.
yeah. I don't know. I like we kind of joke that I don't actually do any farming on here. Like I'm not actually a farmer, so. That's probably somewhat true. I'm as the real farmer. I just like fix the things that are broken.
Well,
So
no, I think you're all farming, but it's interesting to like Ange with like the wetlands biodiversity, on-farm inputs, yourself, fine-tune. Well, you've also done a huge solar project recently as well.
yeah,
Um, this irrigation project is quite unique. It's great inspiration from other farms as well. And then yeah, like Cartwheel from really going the reducing the energy on-farm input, all of that, like taking what I think consumers think of as like I'm buying local, this is sustainable, buying local, reduce my carbon footprint, like your farms are taking it sort of to the next level in a sense, which is really inspirational. And I just did want, I think, oh yeah, that's, I don't have any more of your farm slides. Sorry to confuse people there. People should know that we just kind of, I've put all the photos together in orders that I was hoping to time with each farmer's presentation. But it was I think like 2 years ago, like your question that you came to Jeff and I with was I've been adding this compost for organic matter and fertility. And like I really wanted to get my organic matter up. And like the question you came to us with, okay, I think we're doing pretty good. We've homogenized our soil somewhat in some blocks. I want to reduce my compost, but I don't want to lose all the organic matter that I've invested all this time and money in applying. So you're like, how much can I reduce the organic matter application or the compost application and maintain my soil organic matter? And so we've been playing with that number. I know you were talking with the ministry soil specialist Dieter there for a while. And like we kind of came up with the idea that like you could almost like somewhat half that amount of compost and maintain like still maintain your soil organic matter levels, because I think that's like a concern with a lot of farmers is that you put all this money and time into building your soil organic matter from off-farm inputs, but the oxygen in our forest environments just kind of reclaims that soil organic matter, and you definitely don't want to lose that. So like one question is like how to build your soil organic matter, the other is how to not lose your gains. And that was like that's how sort of this whole case study thing, you started this monster. And
and a monster it is. Yeah.
the monster it is. And yeah, so folks who look at Scott's case study will really look at like what those nutrient inputs from the compost have been, and you'll see how his standard operating procedure is changing in the future to basically like reduce compost and increase other fertilizer for things feather meal and stuff, which could be a cost savings, definitely labor savings, and be a little bit more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I guess I yeah, just I I guess the thing I can kind of leave it with is the vision with the future is it's yeah, it's nice to also hear from Ange and Nigel too, just in terms of uh kind of their aspirations, and it makes me feel like I should be more aspirational as well. But for us, what we want to do is, yeah, continuing to maintain the organic matter is certainly like the big kind of key piece, I think. I'm really excited to see what the soil sensors and how that's all going to integrate with our irrigation this year. Like, I kind of feel like it might actually be really important and really kind of revolutionary in terms of how we're thinking about it. I just don't know, so I'm like not trying to put too much stakes in it. I'm really curious about trying to figure out where all of our nitrogen is going with kind of the results from the onion trial and seeing how the irrigation relates to that is kind of a thing. Um, yeah, we do use feather meal, and I do think like, you know, from a ethical perspective and complications like that. Yeah, I do kind of want to look a little bit more into Ange's seed meal alternatives to do some testing with that if I have time this season or if I can buy some from them. Um, yeah, and then kind of doing a little bit more soil testing and kind of like like tweaking our like standard operating procedure kind of going forward. And that's kind of the main things. And then yeah, like overarching big things like yeah, definitely reducing energy dependence and all that kind of stuff is certainly like things that I at least concern myself with far too much.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. I mean, I think it's what's great just like hearing from the three of you is you're just like building a soil community. And the fact of the matter is we're all farming in these not necessarily agronomic soils. So it is learning and figuring it out together about what works. And you're all growing annual crops. It takes a lot of input, a lot of labor, a lot of intensity there to provide a local food source. And the abundance that these three farms this evening grow for our communities is pretty impressive.
And like Rachel, like I do think like that was the big shocker for me really when we started farming here. Is it's like I came from the our Ontario heavy clay soil to here. I'm like we can't grow anything here. Like I'm a little skeptical, but like the proof is in the pudding. Like the amount, like the stuff that Ange and Gord or the Ange and Gord and Nigel and Laura grow is fabulous, you know. And so they're like it's not we're not on class one soil here, but we can produce some amazing crops.
Yeah, and having a local food system here in the Kootenays. Um, so yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'll plug the case studies again just because that's where you can actually tease out the details as readers. And you also know where to find Scott, Ange, and Nigel. If anybody has any questions specifically, I know we've gone over time, but you can watch it later. Maybe folks have tucked themselves in. If you did have questions, you can ask them now or put it in the chat box. Jeff, you've been watching that, hey, so I don't have to. Okay, great. Jeff, did you have any comments on the case studies?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I think maybe one of the like when we're like sharing like when we've been sharing them outwards, maybe is more so where like my comments are or I have comments would be that like we prepared them to sort of show um like examples of how people are making like doing it and some of the info that's assessed there and not so much that like this is the exact recipe and this is the um sort of template for everyone to use. I think one of the neat things is that these documents are actually like the case studies are sort of like after like quite a few years, this is where you've all landed with some of this work, and it's still an ongoing, like we took the snapshot, but there's already been, some pretty big changes that you've all incorporated. So it's almost like partly the process of coming to pull all of that information together to think about it and then decide what that leaves you with to take a next step. Because it's, yeah, definitely unfortunately it is like that like constant work in progress instead of the like this is where you've landed and now you can just coast.
This is just a soil testing question. And Miriam, you can email me, Rachel at kbfa.ca, and I can send you some labs. But like a lot of certified organic farmers in our region use Logan Labs in the United States. It's just because that kind of analysis pairs with the Steve Solomon's um, nutrient strategies. It like I could let one of the farmers comment on that. But then conventional, like for a Canada lab, A&L Laboratories in Ontario is one that the Ministry of Agriculture uses a lot. There's like more agronomic labs there, and we'd be happy to share those lists with you. I don't know if any of our farmers have a comment on soil labs. Oh,
I end up using Terralink a bit. I've never used Logan Labs, and I've used A&L too. But like, I think the thing is, it's like consistency of lab to use. Because I mean, even when we did the onion trial test, I had like three different soil tests that one was sent to A&L, one was sent to Terralink, and the other one was sent to one of the other labs. And like the results were quite different, and they were all like samples from like the same 50 by 64. Now, my soil's really variable, I get it, but like it's still not same.
I use Logan Labs in the States, and I guess it just started with that because that was recommended with the Steve Solomon's book. And like Scott said, the recommendation also is good to stay with the same lab. So in some ways, I kind of feel like I'm locked in with them. But I do see consistency in my results year to year. Like they make sense. But I can't really speak to other labs.
Yeah, we've also just used we've been using Logan Labs because of I guess just the way that Steve Solomon lays out his analysis. It's just been easier to use, but I've heard A&L is kind of glean similar things from that. I'm kind of wanting to change to A&L, so I'm not sending things to the States because it also like it's expensive and it takes a long time and yeah. And A&L might be sort of more applicable to our soils, I guess. I'm not sure. I think Brendan uses A&L. So it'd be interesting to see what his thoughts are.
I thought Brendan used Logan Labs too.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'm just stuck with them because
consistency.
Yeah, just to be able to see the progress over the years.
Yeah, there's we have a list on our website. I'll put it in the chat in the end. It's a long list because there's a lot of labs and so it's not preferential or anything. There's a few labs that still use variations of the soil tests that were developed in British Columbia, but they're yeah, so I think ultimately, if you find a lab that you feel confident in their results and you know how to interpret their report and things are like that's going smoothly, then yeah, that's kind of a good spot to be in. It would be sort of my thoughts there because the labs do use different processes and in their recommendations, like so labs like Logan Labs and A&L use a certain approach to some of their recommendations, where some of the other labs use a different approach. And so I would always recommend you, like, aside from just what the lab is recommending, looking at the test results as well and being able to sort of glean some of your own info from that instead of just following directly to the lab recommendations. But yeah, I think if you are in a good spot with a relationship with the lab, then that's not
Mhm.
something to, there's no issue there.
Well, thanks, Jeff. And thanks to our panel tonight. That was awesome. Really appreciate the soil building camaraderie and journey to support everybody as um, they figure out how to build soil organic matter, increase soil health, and also meet your crop fertility needs. So it is a multi-pronged approach. And yeah, sharing and being transparent with other farms and just getting into the nitty gritty, I think really helps everybody on their soil journey. And I mean, you've all been at it for over 10 years now, but I'm sure that new farms will really appreciate hearing your journey too. And maybe it provides that little bit of community support because it is a challenging journey at times. And so just like building that community around it is really awesome. And once again, just so impressive, the amount of food produced on your small lot. I mean, it is small plot intensive and there's a lot of food being grown. So I hope some days you reflect on the mouths you're feeding locally because it comes from the Kootenay community and that's pretty cool. So thank you for your hard work.
Thanks for your support, Rachel. You've been
Yeah.
it's been so wonderful having you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel and Jeff.
Yeah, totally. And I would say they should do a round two of case studies with some other farms because I like the process of it was so great for us too. It's like I don't mind when someone says, "Oh wow, I should be doing this totally differently," and then like reevaluating that, when you've been doing it a certain way for a period of time, I think is I don't know, it's really, really cool to just force yourself to look at something at a problem from a different perspective. It was just really enriching for us, for sure. So
Oh,
thank you.
great. Well, I have a little PTSD myself, but I think if I did it again, I would be able to because everyone does their own math and I'm not good at math. So then it's like everyone's doing like it's so unique, the market garden model, because you're doing this 100-foot bed. And so everyone's doing their own math on how many pounds per acre, but then you're doing pounds per bed, but then you're like, how do I do the math if my recommendations are per acre? Now I'm applying it to a per bed basis, and we all had different ways of slicing and dicing that. So um, I appreciated all your patience, and it was a lot of fun in reflection. But yeah, have a good night. Thanks once again, and we'll be in touch. This is actually the last of our Soil Wednesday night series, but we're going to be in the field doing in-person field days. We'll be at Salix and Sedge mid-April and then Bent Plow Farm at the end of April, geeking out on integrated pest management in greenhouse environments at Salix and Sedge, and then getting into the new irrigation system at Bent Plow Farm at the end of April. So next time we see you, it will be in person.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
See you.